Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. When you hear the words Fall River, Massachusetts, I think of two things. You may think of one, that would be the Lizzie Borden murders. I think of two things, the Lizzie Borden murders and Tim Weisberg, but I digress. Our good friend over in Fall River and spooky South Coast. I also think of Lizzie Borden coffee. I don't know, but that's another thing. I don't want to, make the people over at the Lizzie Borden house mad. But I digress again. There's a third thing we should think of here. Clara Fowler. I want to put that name in your head because there's a wonderful new book out there that I want to talk to you about today. Our guest today is Ron Felber. He has written a new book that will absolutely chill you. It will also get you thinking. The book is called The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler. It asks the question, is evil real? Or is it a metaphor for the bad things that people do? And it looks at not only the religious side of things, but the psychological side of things, the scientific side of things. And when you start to think about it, when you start to break things down, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with the psychological, or are we dealing truly with the supernatural side of things? And this is a case from the 1800s. It was very scrupulously researched, and Ron did an amazing amount of work on this particular book. I want to get to Ron right away, and let's get into this program, folks. You are absolutely going to be astounded about this book. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I want to get into this so we can talk about it. Ron Felber is a graduate of Georgetown University. He has written fiction and nonfiction books, including The Unwelcomed, which we'll talk about today, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler, Mojave Incident, Il Dottore, The Double Life of a Mafia Doctor, and The Hunt for Kun Sa, Drug Lord of the Golden Triangle. A number of his works have been produced as television dramas and film documentaries. Ron has began his writing career writing stories for True Detective magazine while working as a deputy sheriff transporting federal prisoners. He teaches creative writing at Drew University's Casperin School for Graduate Studies. Let's bring in right now to Darkness Radio, Ron Felber. Ron, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Good to be here, Tim. I see, too, that you got what everybody gets wrong. Kun Sa. You got it right.
Really?
The Hunt for Kun Sa. He was a drug lord in Burma, but that's a name that gets butchered regularly when people talk about it.
Well, I'll just say my time in Burma was short. No, I'm kidding. I've never been to Burma. Well, I'm glad I could hit that one at least. I was stuttering all over the place except for Kun Sa, which for some reason I managed to stick the landing on that deal. First of all, I want to congratulate you on a well-written, not just well-written, excellently written book, which when we were talking before the show, I know you had said it took not only a lot of research, but you hired a detective to get this accomplished.
I had to.
Explain a little bit behind the research behind this book and the extensive research you had to do for this book.
Well, it's a funny story, a good one. I was a student at Georgetown University back in 1972 when The Exorcist was being filmed at Georgetown. Mm-hmm. And so I had a novel. I was a writer even then. I had short stories and things, and I had my first novel. And so I had the opportunity to meet William Peter Blatty, give him the novel, and say, please help me. I'm a new writer. Please help me with this. And I went back from Washington, D.C. to New Jersey, where I lived with my parents, when I wasn't in school. And it was Thanksgiving. And I got a phone call from Bill Blatty. He said, I really like your book. I'd like to talk to you about it. Come see me at the Marriott Hotel. I have an office there. So I did. And that was one thing. But the most important thing he did was to tell me about a case that he used along with another case that happened in 1949. This one happened 1898 to 1904 in Boston. It was studied, The Unwelcomed Clara Fowler was studied by a team of Harvard Medical School professors, really the foremost minds in psychology and psychiatry pretty much in the world, along with Sigmund Freud. And he gave me this story. He said, I came upon it and I was going to do a story about it, but I decided to work on something else. Why don't you do it? So I tried to write it back in, I don't know, 74 or so as a documentary, but it just didn't work. It came out like this medical textbook. And so I decided to take it and put emotion into it, develop characters. And it must have worked because we won the Maxi Award for Book of the Year just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and I saw that. That by the way, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it is such a good book that I think that's not going to be the only award you win on this, my friend. I think you're probably up for quite a few awards as you go on with the release of this book. It just came out, as a matter of fact. It just came out in May. So I think you're due for a few more awards as well with this book. I know it's a complex case, and it's the psychiatrist, Dr. Morton Prince, who ends up tackling this case, is a psychiatrist who bumped heads with Dr. Sigmund Freud, who he was not a fan of Freud, was he?
Not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, there was a competition. So this was the turn of the century, and the turn of the century in Europe and in the United States was like a Renaissance period. I mean, cars were in the streets, electric lights were in homes. Guys like H.G. Wells were talking about traveling to the moon and et cetera, time machines and things. So it was a time of incredible progress in terms of modernism and in terms of technology. Prince was a materialist. He would be in the behavioralist school these days. That means if you're schizophrenic, it isn't because you weren't breastfed as a child. Mm-hmm. It's because you have a brain lesion or because there's a chemical imbalance in your brain. Freud, of course, was a psychoanalyst, and he really tracked a lot of things back to dreams and things like that, which Prince considered nonsense.
Yeah.
In the middle of this, at the same time, were the spiritualists. And there were about 9 million spiritualists in Europe and the United States that believed you could contact the dead through mediums and that there was a spiritual world, et cetera, that you could communicate with. And, on the face of it, that sounds kind of eccentric, but Sir Arthur Conan Doyle believed that. Mm-hmm. Madame Curie, the founder of X-rays, believed that. A number of physicists, Charles Dickens, Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer of Sherlock Holmes. So, I mean, these were prominent people, prominent scientists and whatnot. And the argument was, and is today, let's say you believe in religion, you believe in God. Let's say that you believe that there are angels and that there are devils. Well, that's a spiritual world.
Yeah.
So, in fact, you're a spiritualist. So there are a lot more spiritualists than you would think. Also, by the way, many believe that you can pray and be in a kind of contact with this spiritual world. So as eccentric as it sounds when you say they're spiritualists, it really covers a much wider base than that.
What I find curious, Ron, is the fact that when we look at science today, it seems like you could say, well, the needle hasn't moved much when it comes to science, but you look at even the last 5 years in science, they've tried to somewhat, I don't want to say move that needle a little bit, but they have come up with the concept of a quantum realm as far as heaven goes. They've said, well, maybe there's a quantum realm where energy goes or where our souls could go. And we'll concede this point that energy has to go somewhere. And you even bring it up in your book.
I do.
That the German scientist, and the name escapes
me. Max Planck.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, by the way. That energy is neither, is neither
being destroyed or created.
Right, created or destroyed. So therefore, it has to go somewhere. So scientists go, okay, well, also in that sense, if you take quantum physics, where energy can be bent with will. Mm-hmm. So it would have to go somewhere. There has to be a quantum place for it to exist. If it can't be created or destroyed, well, it has to exist. It has to sit somewhere when it leaves our body.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of things are being rethought now. in terms of physics and quantum mechanics, and also even in terms of evolution. I mean, there was a Francis Crick, who was the the co-founder of DNA, and won the Nobel Prize for Science, wrote a book called Life. And in it, he said that the odds of evolution being correct, meaning from microbial growth in a swamp somewhere over the millennium, you develop the human brain along with reason and consciousness, etc., would be the equivalent of a tornado going through a junkyard, leaving behind a 747 jet that takes off and flies to Europe. Meaning there's no chance that there's no fossil chain or anything like that. So that was one of the cornerstones of secularism. And Newtonian physics was the other cornerstone, meaning you drop an apple and it falls. Very simple. Gravity, it's very simple. These are the rules of the world. But with quantum physics and also with people reviewing the legitimacy of evolution, Darwinian evolution, the cornerstones of secularism are kind of broken down. And people are saying, now, okay, we're an expanding universe. Where's it expanding to?
Right.
And if it's a result of the Big Bang, what was there before the Big Bang? And when you ask those questions, scientists really hit a total brick wall. And that's fine, because I think science and theology really can exist side by side. I think generally they just call things different names.
I think you're right too, but with that, there comes this. You get the people who say, well, okay, but eventually one is going to want to say the other one has to be right. You know what I mean? So science will take us halfway there. Theology wants to go the other way. The two have to come to an understanding, and they have to come to that focal point where we figure out what's the right answer. And where the two butt heads is, where do we come to an understanding where we think we have the quote unquote right answer? Why does one or the other have to be right, in your opinion?
I don't think it does. As a matter of fact, I mean, to me, science is observation. Mm-hmm. You observe things and you make conclusions. For example, an apple falls from a tree, it hits the ground, hence gravity. But it's an observation. It's not a conclusion. It's an observation.
Right.
So religion is teleological. It isn't about what happens and I observe it and draw conclusions. It's about, I know the end. I have the Bible. I know how it ends. I know how it started. You know, you can do all the observing you like in the middle, and they don't contradict one another. Nothing in science that I'm aware of contradicts the existence of a creator.
So then why, as humans, do we think that one or the other is trying to prove something right? Because I think as a skeptic or cynic, if you're following science, you think science is trying to prove something right. I think as a theologian or someone who follows a religion, you think that religion is the way to go or is trying to prove something right. Why are we tribalistic when it comes to one or the other? Why do we think that one or the other has the answer?
Well, I guess, you know, why do we want this? You know, because we want a result. We have this guy that says he's the best and that guy that says he's the best, and we want a winner. Unfortunately, or fortunately, really, life isn't that way. You know, it's not like, there's a limited pie and you get a piece and I get a piece. If somebody else gets a piece, we don't have any more. It isn't that way. The way it really is that these things, more and more, religion, theology, and science, particularly after quantum physics, particularly because it just destroyed it through all this, you know, this vision of the world. I was just reading a book called The Case Against Reality by David Hoffman.
Okay.
And he says the chances of us knowing what's real as human beings is zero. He says that the human brain isn't meant to take things in and understand them, etc. It's really a shield to keep things out so that you concentrate on getting food, getting procreating, getting a place to live, you know, that's safe, etc. That's evolutionary, meaning that's evolution. And so your brain is meant for survival, human survival, not for understanding the universe. because if all of this was coming into the brain, we couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
So it's quite the reverse of what many people think. Aldous Huxley, who wrote Doors of Perception, had the same theory. He said that what we see is like looking in a mirror. So we'll see our face, but what does that mean? Do we know what the thoughts of that behind that face are? What their religious beliefs are? What music they like? Most of the world, even as we see it, is invisible. I mean, thoughts, opera, theology, ideas, concepts, likes, dislikes are all invisible. Even light is invisible for the most part. Microwaves you can't see, ultralight you can't see, infrared you can't see. So we have a very, very limited perspective. My theory and what the Unwelcomed puts forward, I think, as a kind of premise, are two things. Mm-hmm. One, the physical world is a microcosm. The macrocosm is the spiritual world. The spiritual world is where our souls live and our conscious mind lives. The energy you talked about, the electricity that you talked about.
Right.
So my feeling is that the immensity of the spiritual world is something that we're totally blind to on purpose. Okay. Because of evolution, because we need to eat and whatnot. The other is that evil is real and goodness is real. And basically, human beings are caught in a spiritual war between good and evil, God and the devil. And we make choices, sometimes little ones, that keep most of us in the middle. Okay, I'm not supposed to eat chocolate, but I do, or I'm not supposed to drink beer, but I do, whatever. And so you give in to these little temptations. But on occasion, you have a Jack the Ripper, an H.H. Holmes, a Ted Bundy, people that I met as a deputy sheriff that, to me, they were possessed. Yeah. They surrendered their humanity to the devil for evil, to do evil deeds. Contrary to that would be a Mother Teresa, or the guy that jumps on a hand grenade to save the rest of his platoon, the person that wins the lottery and donates it to charity. So, most are in the middle, but good and evil, are real. That's my point, and that's the point of the book.
I can't disagree with you. I wonder why some people want to deny the existence of evil. And I want to ask you this question, Ron. Why do you think some people want to turn a blind eye to evil? I know there's a lot of psychics out there who say, when I look out into the spiritual ether, I don't see the existence of hell and evil. Why do you think it's so easy for people to turn that blind eye to it?
Well, there's a great dialogue between Leonora Piper, who is a clairvoyant in the book, and the demonic presence. And the demonic presence says, you think you can only see one side of things. Yeah, I'm the other side. Take a good look. Yeah. So it's a binary thing. If there's evil, there's almost got to be good. If there's good, there's got to be evil. This is the tension that human beings deal with, navigate in their life, as I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is a fascinating book. I think what I want to do here, Ron, is before we go to break, I want to start to set up a little bit and tell people a little bit about the background of Clara Fowler. Clara Fowler, and again, this book takes place in the turn of the last century, turn of the 20th century, in the late 1800s. Tell us a little bit about Clara Fowler's beginnings and where she grew up.
Yeah. It's sort of a murder mystery in a lot of ways. So what happens is there's this Radcliffe student named Clara Fowler who's 22 years old, and she wants to be a nun. Ultimately, she wants to be in a convent. She's a student and works as a stenographer, so bright, well-educated, on her way to wonderful things. She is very religious and thinks she has a vocation, a calling, because she has visitations from Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary. So this would be very similar to the girls at Fatima, or any number of visitations in Egypt. There's a tomb Egypt. There's been visitations all over the world. But so she's had these visitations, and she thinks she has a calling. All of a sudden, she starts having incredibly terrible nightmares. When she tries to eat, she sees worms in her food, and so she can't eat. These nightmares are so severe and involve the demonic forces that she doesn't want to sleep. So when she wakes up in the morning, when she does finally go to sleep, exhausted, and finds threatening letters, notes, I hate you. There will be no salvation for you. You can't hide. There's no comfort in heaven or in earth or anywhere. I'm onto you, and I want you dead. And this is what she wakes up to. And it's stunning. She goes to a general practitioner for neurasthenia, which is a way that they described intense fatigue.
Okay.
No sleeping, no eating, etc. And so this is Jackson Putnam, who was a Boston Brahmin like Prince and William James, meaning a very high level in society, Back Bay. And he says, I don't know what to do with this. But he knows that Prince is sort of the father of abnormal psychology, along with William James at Harvard Medical School, and turns them over to Prince. So Prince starts with suggestion, you will sleep well at night. She says, I will sleep well at night. You will have a healthy appetite. I will wake up refreshed in the morning, and strong. So she would repeat these things, and hypnotic suggestion, which is not unstandard. Suddenly, he says, you will sleep well at night, and a bass voice that shakes the room, with eyes now prowling, these menacing eyes prowling, says, she will not sleep well at night. She will not have a healthy appetite. She will not be refreshed. And Prince is like, obviously taken aback,
Yeah.
Who are you? Just this brooding presence. Who are you? Brooding presence. Finally, I am the devil and I want her dead. So that's really the entree into the case of Clara Fowler.
Yes, it is. I tell you what, we'll take our break right here. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about her family. And I want to get into why it's so unusual. Her beginnings are so unusual. And why she's so alone. I want to talk about why she's such a, first of all, why she's such a loner. Why she, put it this way, why trouble follows her everywhere. We'll bring that up when we come back, Ron.
Sure.
And why it seems that even though she wants to be a nun, she's destined to have evil follow her everywhere. I'll lead with that little tease. And we'll talk about why Dr. Prince is so convinced that this isn't a spiritual problem. It's a psychological problem. Because this is a theme that goes throughout the entire book. Dr. Prince is so convinced that this is psychological and rooted in her brain, which is fascinating. It's a fascinating issue. When we come back, more with Ron Felber. And again, folks, this book is absolutely fascinating. It's a book that you absolutely need to pick up. We have a link in the description of this program. It's called The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Felber. I'm sorry, Clara Fowler. The names are similar, Ron. The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler is the name of the book. And believe me, folks, it is a Maxi Award-winning book of the year. You're going to want to pick it up. We have a link in the description of this program. The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler. Pick it up right now in the break. When we come back, more with Ron Felber when we continue on the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Our guest is Ron Felber. He is the author of this wonderful new book called The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler. It deals with not just the possession of Clara Fowler, but also some of the, I guess you could call it the saviors that try to come in and help Clara, including Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary.
Yeah, that's quite true.
Which is amazing that she's got not only the devil, but the angel coming in at the same time to try to help her and try to save her. But at the same time, Ron, you've got a psychiatrist who's sitting there and telling her it's all in your head.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is amazing as well.
Well, you know, the interesting thing, and I guess to Prince's credit, he formed a team. And he really had to have a team because, as I mentioned, there were so many spiritualists at the time. And here's a woman, I'll just give you some of the symptoms. Her face remolds into a different face. Her eyes change. She speaks in languages that she's not supposed to know. She has superhuman strength. She exercises clairvoyance and unbridled rage at anything that's religious, whether it's a rosary or a Bible, a priest, whatever it might be. And William James, also a member of the team, studies her in the demonic state and notes that she does not experience any pain, no need of food, no need of sleep, awake 24/7, no illness, no fatigue, and by the way, knows every dream, every desire, the minutest thought that goes on in Clara Fowler's head as a totally separate entity that uses that knowledge against her to try to destroy her so it can take over the body, which is really chilling.
Not only chilling, but as Dr. Prince is going through this, he's trying to go through every psychological disorder that he can find, and he's trying to cross-reference it with different cases. He thinks he has a grasp on it through different stages, and this goes over a couple of different years, doesn't it, Ron? I mean, this is one of those things where it's
6
not,
years actually.
Yeah, and it's not one of those things where he's trying to get this done in a year, or he's trying to usher her out, or he thinks he has it and he has an answer for it in a short amount of time. He's actually trying to, I don't want to say he's trying to cleave her personalities or separate them, but in a way he's trying to separate them. And at one point, doesn't he try to put them all together?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he tries to fuse the personalities. His theory is, and we go back to the family structure there. Clara Fowler's father was a monstrous man.
Yeah.
Her mother died shortly after the birth of one of her siblings. She had two siblings that died in their infancy, 4 days old, under very suspicious circumstances, separated by 4 years, I believe, and on the fourth day after their birth. The father is a brutal alcoholic and a wife beater. The mother dies, so Clara is really stranded along with a sibling with this terrible father who has a history of assaults and a criminal record, etc. And as it turns out, I mean, Fall River is noted for many things. Certainly the Lizzie Borden murder comes up, but as recently as 1979 and 1980, there was a satanic cult that was discovered there where, I think his name is Carl Drew, murdered 3 individuals in satanic ceremonies. But the idea of satanic ceremonies, Lizzie Borden, Juan Carriaro, another axe murder that happened very near Lizzie Borden's house, very near the Fowler's house. There was a satanic cult at that time as well. And so Prince, who, by the way, leaves it totally out of his book. He wrote a book on this, but I guess for privacy reasons, he expunged a lot of the background here. But his contention is that there was a catastrophic psychical event that split her into two. So since she was a religious person, and since she was influenced by her father, who was evil, truly evil, that these two elements clashed. They separated and clashed, and they each thought they were the possessor of this body. And so he was a materialist. Richard Hodgson, who is also a member of the team and a spiritualist, said, no, no, no. You know, it's not logical to say that all of these symptoms, telekinesis and clairvoyance and, languages and different voices and facial changes, etc., could happen at the same time to one individual. I mean, it's possible that, okay, somebody is clairvoyant, possible, all right, we can maybe prove that. Maybe they are averse to a religious article. But when you put this all together, there's one answer for it, and there's two words: demonic possession. And of course, he and Prince fight tremendously.
Right.
And Prince had a vested interest in trying to solve this from a psychiatric standpoint, because he was in competition with Sigmund Freud. Freud had written in 1901 Interpretations of a Dream, which was a huge, event in the psychiatric, the medical world. Prince thought that if he could prove this phenomenon that's gone on for thousands of years, even to the times of the Bible, was a psychiatric condition, he would overshadow Prince, and he would be the leader of psychiatry going into the 20th century. So he had a vested interest in naming it dissociation and putting all these things together in a way that was a behavioralist philosophy.
At the same time, as I'm looking it up, and it's in the book as well, there wasn't much separation between, you're talking about Fall River, between the time where John Fowler has these tragedies happen with these two children that die, and the actual Lizzie Borden murders, the Borden tragedies. There's other tragedies that you bring up in the book that happen around that area.
Yes. Actually, Juan Correaro was the name of a Portuguese farm worker.
Yes.
Who just, I think, maybe 4 miles and less than 6 months after the Lizzie Borden, slaughter, he axe murdered his boss's wife. Now, this was a town that hadn't had a murder in 50 years. Now, all of a sudden, you have these two incredibly brutal murders. And then, by the way, the Fowler home, where there were 2 suspicious deaths, and one later in Boston, 2 suspicious deaths. This was all separated by a few years and a couple of miles, which leads our sort of detective, a real life guy, the city marshal, Rufus Hilliard. Rufus Hilliard starts to put these things together because he was the investigator for the Lizzie Borden, Correaro, and Fowler situation.
Yeah.
And he's convinced the father strangled these 2 infants, and wants Clara Fowler to testify against her father. And so this is a dogged lawman. They call him Basset. That's his nickname, because he's like a basset hound. He doesn't give up.
Yeah.
And it's a critical character in the story, because it puts it all together in an incredibly paranormal way at the end.
Yes, and again, we're not giving that away. You got to go get the book to get that, folks. But it's pointed out in the book quite brilliantly. Clara isn't exactly the most stable person to go, try and pin down John Fowler for any of these crimes, because she's not, I mean, whether it be mentally unstable or demonically possessed, she's not one to be put on the stand for any of this stuff, right?
No, certainly not then. But prior to that, she was a very stable, relatively stable individual.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, this was like an onslaught, a personal onslaught that all of a sudden, came into her life like a tornado,
Yeah. But I mean, at this point, especially since Dr. Prince has been working on her, A lot of things have happened. And again, you have to go get the book to see what's happened. But I mean, a lot of things have happened and have been, progressing as far as Dr. Prince's work with her. And quite a bit has been going on in this story. There's this demon that is, and I want to talk a little bit about the demon. We can get a little bit into it without giving too many spoilers here, Ron. But this thing that has overtaken Clara is quite powerful. And if you believe in the demonic side of it, I want to get to the demonic side of it for a moment without giving away too much.
Sure.
It not only has taken over Clara, but it has also reached out and touched the people around her. And I got to it in the, before we went to break, but she has this thing where she ends up being alone. And the reason she ends up being alone is because tragedy befalls the people around her. Can you talk to a little bit how this demon reaches out and touches the people around her and how they end up getting swept up by tragedy? What is it that makes this demon somewhat special?
Well, if you ask Dr. Prince, it would be the power of suggestion.
Okay.
But like a witch doctor would say, Tim, I put a curse on you and whatever, in 3 days, your heart will stop beating or something. And in tribal situations where people really believe in the witch doctor and really believe in magic, oftentimes the person's heart does stop. And that's a matter of suggestion. So that would be Prince's answer. Maybe a better answer would be infestation is the word. So, for example, Huxley, Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World and Doors of Perception, also wrote a book called The Devils of Loudon. And this was about a demonic possession case, believe in the 16th century, maybe the 17th century. And it happened in France at a convent where the nuns became possessed. And not just one, it started with one, but it mushroomed into a kind of epidemic. So the bishop sends 4 priests to stem the tide of this epidemic. And it turns out that they get possessed. 3 of them wind up dying within the year. And the 4th one goes insane and spends the last 25 years of his life in a lunatic asylum. So even with Prince, as you remember, I mean, Prince starts to worry about his daughter. This creature is in his home.
Yeah.
And by the way, threatening his family, showing things, clairvoyance. For example, Bassett had brought some newspaper headlines to Prince, and the daughter answered the door and got them. And the demon says to Prince, which made his blood run cold, how did your daughter like the newspaper articles that I sent? And Prince, of course, almost falls off his chair. But at the end, he confesses to William James, in his terms, psychotics scare me. These people will not give up. This will not go away. And it's getting to me. I'm having terrible dreams, etc.
Right.
So once again, you find this bifurcation where from a scientific standpoint, you see it this way and you can make a case. From a spiritualist or a religious or, whatever you want to call it, it's another case that's very strong. And you can really choose your poison, I suppose. But at the end, even William James, who's really the most neutral, believes that and actually sends Prince a letter. The book starts with this little letter that William James sends to Prince. Dear Prince, you'll hardly believe me, I fear, but I've only just attained to the reading of your dissociation book. Not only is the case destined to be historic, but your exposition is a masterpiece of narrative art. But who or what is the demon? That's a dark point.
Wow. And it's almost to Dr. Prince's health and wellness that he keeps pushing off the reality of what's going on that he keeps, dissociating himself from the supernatural and saying,
Yeah.
you know what, it's got to be a medical solution. It's psychosis. It's got to be something that's psychological in nature that's going on with her. And he keeps trying to find a medical solution. Well, it's got to be this. It's got to be that. Yeah. Even when the supernatural,
or a combination of this, that, and the other thing,
right? Even though it's sitting right in front of him, there's evidence to the contrary that's sitting right in front of him.
Well, actually, even this is from his notes, directly from his notes, not a word changed, about his exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
Putting my finger to her forehead, I held up a cross, reciting the words from the rites of exorcism. The effect was remarkable. Notice the scientific language, the very neutral. The effect was remarkable. She shrank from me like Mephistopheles, shrinking from the cross, cursing God and the saints and all things holy, screaming that it made a terrible, painful sensation run through her body. She feared it more than anything. Well, he would say she feared it because she believed she was possessed and believed the devil had infiltrated her. And that's why the Bible and whatnot causes. Now, of course, if you use Occam's razor,
yes,
which is the model of logic that says the simplest answer, the one that's in front of your face, is usually the correct one. Right. Well, if you use Occam's razor, she's possessed by a demon.
Which, again, that's hard science versus, spiritual belief. And in those days, if you were a hard believer in medical science, you had a hard time putting your spiritual belief in there. But you do a beautiful job of showing that his edges were softening, even though he was treating her and trying to really maintain his edge, that they did soften as the case went on. And again, I'm not trying to spoil anything here, but that Dr. Prince had these moments where he said, you know what? Even though I'm trying to remain steadfast where I am, there's something to this.
Yeah, well, even you see, again, you have to put your mind in, put in his shoes, where he's coming from. He's in this competition with Freud. He's looking at the 20th century. He wants to be the leader of the pack in terms of theories and whatnot. And he looks at everything and puts it back in the box of science.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's an exorcism, whether it's voices. So he was like, wow, how do you explain these voices that are a man's voice, a rumbling, explosive voice, a thickening of the vocal cords because she's been screaming so much? Well, that's not a very good explanation, scientific or otherwise. It's just not a very good explanation.
Yeah. There's another trauma that happened to Clara that he throws in there as well. And again, without getting into too many spoilers, she had a husband at one time.
Yes.
That he works into this, that he believes that this also may have led to, and it can lead to, multiple personalities.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit without getting too spoilery? I don't want to.
Sure. I mean, when you think about turn of the century, meaning 1898 to 1904, you tend to think, I think, of people being really primitive.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. Guys like Freud, were way ahead of their time. Prince was way ahead of his time. William James, way ahead of his time. So these guys were writing books that psychiatrists today study,
mm-hmm.
In medical school. So it wasn't like that. He was very familiar with multiple personality. There were many documented cases. He was very familiar with schizophrenia. He was very familiar with Tourette's syndrome. So in a way, in an odd way, the equipment has changed. But in terms of the theories, they haven't changed all that much. And so he looked at all of this through the lens of all of the cases that were around at that time, which, by the way, were many and covered most of what we know now in terms of diseases, mental afflictions. And none of them, this case didn't fit into any of them. And so he was left, really left sort of marooned with his theories, and his belief. But even he, and this again is a scientific way of looking at it, he would say, like for telekinesis, well, that can happen not because of anything supernatural, but because there are elements of the human brain, capacities of the human brain that we haven't discovered yet. So you see, in a way, scientists can come up with anything. You throw something at them, and they'll say, "Well, it's a thickening of the vocal cords."
Right.
Well, it's this or that, or they name it. This is the name of what it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean you understand it. It just means you observed it and you gave it a name.
Yeah. Yeah. Which leads me to this question, Ron. In modern day, when we think about how advanced science is, I mean, you referred to the fact that we keep referring back to Freud, we keep referring back to this period in science and the fact that they were so advanced, and we lean on that quite often now in modern day science.
Yes, we do.
We think about how often exorcism is performed. You think about the fact that the Vatican now has said we need more exorcists. They're out there recruiting as it is now.
Exactly.
They have more and more bodies on the street, so to speak.
150 exorcists in the United States now, and only a few years ago, I mean 10 years ago, there were a handful.
Yeah.
But now there's actually, the Vatican has an actual, I don't want to call it an army, but I guess you could. It has a teams all over the world of exorcists, because this phenomenon, far be it from not happening anymore, which a lot of people say, well, I don't know, demonic possession. I haven't heard about anything like that in years, maybe since The Exorcist. Well, the fact of the matter is it's been expanding exponentially, the number of cases.
Yeah.
Hence the teams that have been developed and the proliferation of exorcists all over the world.
You also have the growth of the psychiatry field. You have telehealth now. You have more and more psychiatrists in the proliferation of that field. So I guess my question would be, which side is winning? Is it truly a growth of darkness in this country, or is it the growth of darkness, or is it the growth of evil that we're seeing in this country? Or is it a little bit of both?
I wrote a book called Mojave Incident a number of years ago. It was about a case of alien abduction. And interestingly enough, even as physicists now say, we don't know how the earth was created. We don't know how human beings were created. We don't. I mean, we don't know what happened before the Big Bang. We don't know what's going to happen after. We don't know. And maybe it's one of those mysteries that human beings will never know. I happen to think that's true.
Yeah.
But in terms of Prince and in terms of the others, Hodgson had his point of view and says this. This is a quote from him. "The one fact of demonic possession, so remarkable in our time, right, is the power these hostile beings exert among men, and what they may, in far more subtle and less obvious ways, do to corrupt us." Baudelaire said the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing people he doesn't exist.
Right.
And so if you're asking me, is there more evil in the world now? I think there's more secularism. And I had mentioned this alien abduction case, but now I saw an interview with Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, and they're talking about UFOs. And Tucker Carlson makes an astounding sort of thing, at least by my lights. And he says, well, clearly these are spiritual beings. They're not extraterrestrial. Even David Grush, when he did his congressional hearings on UFOs, UAPs, and terrestrial, he said non-human entities and interdimensional beings.
Yes. Yeah.
So what is an interdimensional being? An angel is an interdimensional being.
Very true.
Devil is an interdimensional being. And Tucker Carlson makes that point really clear. I'm trying to find the quote or two.
While you're finding that, I'll tie something else onto that. I've had a guest on this show many times who's a demonologist. His name is Nathaniel J. Gillis, and my audience is familiar with him. And he says that he's encountered many times, for lack of a better term, a demonic type being that morphs itself into what most people would think is an extraterrestrial. And it takes that face because people are familiar with that face, and they're more comfortable with that face, and they are more accepting of that face, and they think they're actually seeing something that they can relate to, and they can focus their eyes on it and think, oh, it's something that's not demonic, but then it will shift its face when it's become more accepting of it and it presents its true face.
Yes. Well, actually, I have some things from the demonic possession case, the Unwelcomed, and also from Mojave incident where the people describe the alien beings. So here's what Clara Fowler says. He's not human. His eyes are red as hot coals, his face savage looking, as if a maddened animal, a jackal or a pig and a human were combined. This is what the Hesses say about the alien creature. She watched the red eyes, and by the way, red eyes, hot coal eyes, move close enough so that their dwarfish bodies became apparent, like gremlins no larger than 3 feet in height. With heads the size of cats, the creatures reveled around the camper with boundless energy. The red eyes pierced the night as a pack of them tumbled and frolicked like child monsters. Both talk about the smell of sulfur. This is what Clara Fowler says. And the scent. I can tell when it's near by the scent of sulfur that precedes it. The Hesses about the alien abduction.
Yep.
It was then they became aware of the smell, a rank chemical odor like burning rubber. It was sulfur, Steve decided. In both cases, we see a Virgin Mary. And really what saves the Hesses is what they call a comforter. They describe the comforter as such. The virulence the demons inflicted was, or the aliens inflicted, was ushered out by a new, totally translucent presence, unmistakably feminine. They watched in astonishment as the smoke-white, swirling form descended, a being that in other times would have been called an angel, radiant, exquisite in appearance, her lucid robe flowing as she floated gracefully toward them. It's all right. I'm here now to protect you. Be at peace. It's almost over. Contrast this to Clara Fowler talking about the Virgin Mary. The Virgin is surrounded by light, brighter than I've ever seen. Her face and eyes, the tenderness in her voice, meant to give me comfort. That is the way the Virgin wants me to see her, as a comforter, someone I can always count on. I mean, so you ask, is evil on the rise? I think secularism took over maybe after the atom bomb or so, where we just thought, we've unleashed this and we're like gods. And I think secularism, Darwinian theory, really took root going forward after that. And I think that along with secularism comes a kind of a barrenness, I think a kind of brittleness. I don't know that I met too many happy atheists.
No.
I mean, because really what you're eliminating is exactly what saved the Hesses and exactly what saved Clara Fowler, which is hope.
Yeah.
Hope. And hope comes from above.
True. Very true. Very true. I'd have to ask you this then, Ron, as we move forward, there's not a rush in today's society of people wanting to grasp onto theology. You don't see modern society saying, if anything, people are enthralled with darker things. I mean, you look at the controversies in today's society, the things that grab ratings are the things that are darker. People are still enthralled with darker things, and they like to play around with controversy. And when you When you say things that start with God, they go, oh, yeah, God. And I don't know that I want to hear that.
Yes. Well, maybe you answered your own question.
So
maybe evil really has become infiltrated in almost every aspect of things.
I guess the other part of the question is, so how do you get people to come back to the light? How do you get them to say, you know what? When you hear about some of the torture, and when you read your book, the Unwelcomed, the Curious Case of Clara Fowler, and you read about some of the torture that these people go through, not just Clara, but the people surrounding Clara, which is chilling, Ron. It's absolutely chilling what some of these people were tortured to, not only just in the living, in the here and now, but then cast into the pits of hell. Let's face it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you think you're going to burn forever? Right away, I'm ready to do a 180, right? That's not anything I want to fool around with or flirt with.
I think what's happened, at least in the United States, I don't know about the rest of the world. I mean, Europe, I think, has best been brutalized by wars. World War I, World War II. I don't think they've ever recovered from that psychologically. Certainly not Germany or England, for example. But I think, I think that people are desensitized. For example, if even 20 years ago, which isn't a long time, David Grush got up in front of Congress and said, a high-level intelligence fellow, a high-level military guy, said, there are non-human entities that we have captured and have. There are recovered UFOs that we have. This has been going on for years. They may be interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial, but they exist. We have Navy pilots that have filmed videotapes, etc. 20 years ago, it would have shaken the world. There'd be headlines all over the world.
Yeah.
Today, that happens. You have Felber, the other Navy pilot, and others. A number of them, high level people that showed videotapes, radar tracking, God knows what else, and people don't bat an eyelash.
Right.
They don't react because we've been acclimated. Much like they say, if you put your hand in cold water and then gradually elevate the temperature, by the time it's boiling, you won't feel anything in your hand.
Right.
Because you become acclimated to the rise in temperature. I think similarly, we've been sort of stripped away of a belief in an afterlife and in a spiritual world. And I think the country and countries involved are worse off for it.
I think it's I want to eventually jump to the alien thing here in a moment, but I think it's just a matter of being shocked back into seeing or hearing or getting a few cases flashed in front of your eyes in order to start believing again. I think really when people read your book, they're gonna start to realize that, hey, you know what, this stuff is kind of real.
Exactly.
It's not an imaginary thing. All you have to do, if you really want to start to realize that there is an afterlife and there is good and evil and there are consequences, is to read a book like this, like The Unwelcomed, or to watch an exorcism on YouTube, or to really experience one of these things, and you'll see for yourself with your own two eyes that there are consequences.
Certainly.
I want to get your opinion on something, and that's this. Do you think there is a dividing line between non-human entities and extraterrestrials? And the reason I ask this question is this. Because, again, I want to go back to psychics for a second. And the I see and I believe dividing line. And this is what I mean by that. Because you get people who have had, I guess you want to say, experiences with these things, And they say, no, they're just here to help. It's, again, the love and light crowd. It's they're here to help us. If you ever see that they come in and they take our nuclear weapons out of silos, and they make sure we're not firing them at each other, and they're here to make sure that we're not going to destroy our planet. And no, they're here, and you hear about the Nordics, and you hear about these different races, and you know where I'm going with this, Ron. So
yes.
Is there a difference between the races that are here to help us and the races that are here to destroy us? Do you believe in that or no?
Well, I mean, I think that most people, and John Mack says this in his book called Abduction, and John Mack, again, was a Harvard head of the Harvard psychiatric studies at Harvard, so head of the department. And he said that most of these, the large majority of these, the people were not better off because of it. They suffered from chronic nightmares, chronic insomnia, eating disorders, maybe sexual dysfunction. So if these things were like all good, I suppose people would feel really great about it and, be proselytizing and whatnot. And it's a great world and it's going to be an even better world. But that isn't what happens. And what does happen is these people are pretty haunted. And you look at the case of the Mojave incident with the Hesses, it wasn't a pleasant experience. And by the way, they originally, of course, saw craft and all of this, were in the craft, et cetera. And that was recovered through retrogressive hypnosis. But they became very religious. They were religious, but I think it really solidified that. And the bishop that they went to, because the story was pretty well known, said, you didn't have an alien encounter. You had a demonic possession encounter.
Wow.
Hence the comforter, hence the angel that comes down and saves them, in the story. So I guess what I've heard, and I'm not sure that this is what I think, is I haven't really determined exactly where I come out on that in terms of UFOs and the connection. But clearly there's a connection, and clearly the experiences that many people have, whether it's invasive examinations and things like that, are not pleasant and don't leave them the better off afterwards. So in that sense, I think you could certainly make the case it's demonic. And the other thing, I mean, a biblical scholar might say something like, Christ warned about false gods and false prophets and people that would be deceiving you, with acts of wonder, etc. And they would say that the connection is that this whole UFO alien abduction phenomenon is really Satan creating a false reality and a false hope, where it is very secular, it isn't spiritual, whereupon somebody would see, let's say in Zatum, Egypt, they see this beautiful woman, atop a church bell tower, and I say it's the Virgin Mary. Now, I'm not so sure. Take that out and do it today, and that same person might say, oh, that's an alien. That's an alien being. So a lot of it is context, but I think the bottom line is, does this leave people better off or worse off? And most of these experiences, particularly the one that I know very intimately, was a horrible experience, horrible. And it just pretty much destroyed their lives, and their salvation was the church. You draw your own conclusions, that's been my experience.
I hear you. So let's take it to a whole different extreme then. If these extraterrestrials, or whatever you want to call them, if they were demonic, whatever they are that are coming from other worlds or other dimensions or whatever they are that are coming here and are doing damage, are we doing the wrong thing by going out into space and trying to find these things? Or do you believe that there's actually another race that's exactly like ours that's eventually somewhere out there? Do you think there's actual other life that's friendly out there, or are we just stirring up trouble?
Well, actually, during one of the hypnotic sessions, they asked Dawn Hess under, retrogressive hypnotic trance, You know, where do these come from? What do they want? And she talks about a one supreme. And so somebody says, a psychiatrist says, one supreme. They come from the one supreme. Is that like a president? She answers, it's like a God, because they are not made in the image of God like we are. It's very specific to that. The book doesn't really focus on that, but if you want to look at the transcripts,
Yeah.
I mean, there are things like that. I mean, basically, it says, well, how can I, what more do you know? She just says, read the Bible. I mean, very clear. And so there's just this element, and a lot like Prince. I mean, Prince looked at this, and it's just impossible to ignore. I mean, there's certainly a religious element. If somebody says they see visitations of the Virgin Mary, they see a demon, well, and they fall into a very traditional and historical pattern of what these visions would be. Well, you can't say this has nothing to do with religion. You can't.
Yeah.
Not if you're an accurate observer.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I know some people try to turn a blind eye to it and say, well, I don't want to I don't want to mix the two, I don't want my chocolate, my peanut butter. I don't want my peanut butter and my chocolate.
Yeah.
I don't want to try to put religion into the space thing. I don't want to put space into the religion. I want to take it. I want it just to be scientific. I want to look out there and think that if I run into an alien out there, it's just another being. And then that's all that is.
Right.
But is it possible that it's not just that's all it is, and that we have to, it's not just, it's more than what it is.
Absolutely.
And I think that, you always have to look into alternative ways and means, I guess is I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this, Ron. I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to dance around what it is I'm trying to say here, but you always have to question what it is that if things are showing up on your doorstep.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, human beings, at least intelligent human beings, are curious. They're naturally curious. That's why we have penicillin today. That's why we have jet engines, because somebody was curious about how these things work. And so I don't think it's a good idea to say, well, we have to stifle this curiosity. I think that it's important to explore things with an open mind. But if at the end you're going to say, well, the spiritual world doesn't exist, God doesn't exist, well, I mean, you're already starting from a premise that's not open-minded.
Right.
So I mean, I think a guy like William James is a good prototype for the way people should look at things. I have an open mind. I observe. I'm a human being with a brain. I try to sort this information out and come to a conclusion. By the way, I found that quote from Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, maybe you remember what I read from Richard Hodgson, that in subtle ways that were influenced and corrupted. This is what Tucker Carlson says about alien beings. If they're spiritual beings, which I believe they are, it's binary. They're either team good or team bad. This is an advanced race of beings from somewhere else. But the template that any society before us has used is a spiritual one. There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a spiritual world that's acting on us, good and bad, all the time. That sounds like exactly what Richard Hodgson said 125 years ago.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so when you get a mainstream influencer like Tucker Carlson saying things like this, I think there's a big change going on. I think there's a huge change going on where people understand that there are multi-universes, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of universes, that we're, a very small but apparently important piece in that puzzle.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are coming to the conclusion, maybe when you're hanging on a phone with a recording for 2 hours, or maybe when, the sensors in your car, have all the lights going off and whatnot, you say, maybe technology really isn't the answer to everything.
Yeah, well, you limit your scope of your sight when you try to focus it on a piece of machinery. I mean, machinery
Yes.
can't pick up everything. It's focused on just a narrow scope of
Yes.
waves of you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
You know, when you're using a telephone, it's only picked up on a certain scope of either radio waves if you're using a wireless phone, cell phone. So, I mean, you're not picking up any spectrum of wide array of radio waves. So
That's right.
I mean,
Exactly.
you know, so the fact of the matter is if you're using technology, you're limiting your scope.
I agree. I mean, I just don't think it's the answer. I think that at a period in time, really the turn of the 20th century, people were starting to think that. And maybe after the moon shot, maybe after the atom bomb, you know, I think everything became in computer, the wide, incredible burst of computer knowledge and AI information, et cetera. I think technology seemed to answer all the questions, or that it was going to answer all the questions. But even the most important physicists now don't talk about that. They don't talk about that.
Very true. And I think we lose sight of the fact that when we make tools are supposed to be just a singular thing to help us get a job done. Mm-hmm. That they're not the be all end all to get
Exactly.
for the job, that they're just to help us get a job done. And sometimes we think the tool ends up being the completion of the job. And
Exactly.
It's not. It's just something to help us get a job done.
Yes.
And that we fall into that trap and we get lazy. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and that
Intellectually as well.
yes,
Not just
intellectually,
physically, right?
yeah. When we think the job, the tool is going to do the job for us, and that's
Right.
not how it's supposed to work.
Well, I mean, if you go by the way things are, I mean, look at the media. I mean, so what are you talking about? P. Diddy and, Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt. And I mean, is this really the real world? I mean, is this really what should preoccupy people's minds? Now, maybe it's a diversion from the stress of real life, and I'll go with that. I mean, I'll watch a baseball game and, fine, people need to divert. But when it becomes a preoccupation, maybe people's heads are just filled with nonsense, and a more serious conversation has to happen.
well, yeah, I think I think people have gotten used to being numb, to being anesthetized, because it feels better. You don't
exactly.
you don't hurt.
Yeah. Well, what's the song? Comfortably Numb, right?
Yeah, comfortably numb. If you're in a state of unease, or if you're in a state of hurt, then and you're uncomfortable, then but people don't realize that that's the world. That's the world, Ron. The world is uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
in order to advance, you have to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Advancing is not being comfortable.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And that's just life. Life is being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
A meaningful life, yeah.
yeah, and you're always, if you're comfortable, you're not advancing.
Yeah, exactly. No pain, no gain. Right?
That's right. That's the old saying. So I don't know why we got preachy on a soapbox, but hey, that's part of it. I guess that's pretty much where we go with this show. The book is amazing, Ron. I want to tip my cap to you. And you
Thank you. That really means a lot. I'll tell you, I worked very hard on this book. I could almost tell you I worked 50 years on this book, because I tried, I failed, I redid it. I had to get more information. I actually hired people to help me research and get to the bottom of some of these, genealogical chains. And it was a lot of work. But I'm happy with this book. I'm happy with it. I think it's an important book.
You did an excellent job. The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler is available right now. We have a link in the description of this program. I encourage you folks to go get it. Go get this book and absorb it. It really is an excellent book. It's a complex book. It's got, not only is it a murder mystery, it's got the psychological side of it. It also has the spiritual side of it and the supernatural side of it. It is a well-rounded book that I believe you are going to enjoy, especially the listeners of this program. Ron Felber, I want to thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Tim.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much.
All right.
I want to thank Ron Felber for being on the program today. The name of the book, The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler, is available right now. We have a link to it in the description of this program, and I encourage you all to go out and get that book, folks. Boy, you want to talk about creepy, you want to talk about the balance between the science and the supernatural, and the fact that even if you're a skeptic, you can come to this book, you can read it, and you can get yourself to go, you know what? Is evil real? Or is it just a metaphor for really the bad things that people do? It'll get you thinking, folks. This book will really get you thinking. And it's a real case. That's the beautiful thing about it. There's even the true crime aspect that gets thrown into this book. It's really quite the beautiful book that Ron has put together for you guys. And I was really intrigued throughout the entire book. And there's really these twists and turns in the book that keep you thinking from the beginning to the end. Again, The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler. Quite the intriguing read. I encourage you to go pick it up. You know, the other thing that didn't occur to me when I booked Ron, and I booked Ron months ago to be on the show, is that the show was going to air on June 6th of 2024. 6/6/24. 6624. 666. Yeah. Wasn't thinking. Ironic, huh? Sometimes things just line up the way they line up. It's just kismet. It's just fate. I didn't do it on purpose. I swear to you, I did not do it on purpose. But maybe the devil made me do it too. How's that for sly? Coming up on the weekend, before we come up on the weekend, folks, I do have a couple of serious things we need to take care of. Some housekeeping items. And this is really serious. I do have some prayer and healing requests that I need to make for a couple of family members. Not my family in particular, but our family as a collective. First, I want to start with a good friend of ours of the show, and that is Corey Swap, who's the owner of Jelly Bean and Julia's. And I know I rave about their barbecue. I've raved about it in the past. I love that barbecue, I'll tell you. Unfortunately, Corey's father was helping out at the restaurant. He was cleaning up just last week at the restaurant. And it's, gosh, I even hate to say this because I've worked with Corey's father. We were out at St. Patrick's Church last year at the festival there. We were having a good time, and I had such a great conversation with Dad. And as Corey's dad was working out there, out at the restaurant, unfortunately, he had a cardiac event, and he had to go in for surgery. I have not heard from Corey since, and I've been frantically trying to get a hold of him to find out how Dad's doing. I realize things are busy right now, so I'm trying not to stress Corey as to how things are going. I know he's going to hear this podcast. But I ask you guys to put forward not only your prayers and your thoughts and your energy to Corey's dad, to Mr. Swap, but also put forward your love to him too, because he's such a great guy, a hardworking guy. And he's such a kind, accepting man who, you know, treats you like you're his kid as well. And he's always welcoming and happy to see you when you come and say hey to him. I felt so incredibly bad when I saw it because, you know, Corey tried to get a hold of me via my Instagram, and I don't, you know, I mean, I check my messages there, but I get deluged with messages on all my social media, and sometimes I don't keep up on those messages quite as often as I should. And when I saw that, my heart just sank that I was kind of late to the party with that message. And again, I apologize to Corey that I wasn't up on that. And I should have been. But just please keep your thoughts out to Corey's dad Mr. Swap, he had triple bypass surgery. He suffered that heart attack while sweeping the floors there over at Jelly Bean and Julia. They had, of course, they have the new location over there in Coon Rapids. In case you've been trying to look for them over there in Anoka, they have moved to Coon Rapids in their new location. And congratulations to them as they're moving up and moving forward in the world. And they've got great things in their future there. So if you haven't checked them out, by the way, in the new location in Coon Rapids, please do. Please check them out there. So, Mr. Swap, we hope you get better. And we hope you're feeling better. And we're praying for you to heal quickly. The other family member we hope it gets better quickly and recovers quickly is Papa Bruiser. You know, I know you guys have been asking week after week, and you keep asking. And there's please, and I'll keep trying to find out how Bruiser is doing. Beer City Bruiser is Papa Bruiser. Papa Bruiser, unfortunately, had a brush fire it was a natural brush fire. As far as we know, I don't know if anybody set I haven't heard if it was arson or not, but I think it was something to the akin of 3 miles worth of brush fire out in Arizona around his property and other people's property out there where Papa Bruiser lives. And Papa Bruiser was injured pretty badly. He suffered 3rd-degree burns on his leg, his right leg, amongst other injuries. I mean, Papa Bruiser could have died. It was pretty serious. And Bruiser went out to Arizona to help take care of Papa. And he reached out to me. He sent me pictures. He sent me video. I shared it with the Darkness Radio chat room. And, you know, I didn't know what to say other than just tell Bruiser that, you know what, I feel so horrible. I feel horrible that not only did that happen to Papa, but that, you know, Bruiser's had a lot of bad things happen in 2024 to him. And I know you guys are anxious to get him back on the show. And I understand. I'm anxious to get him back, too. I really am. I miss the chemistry and the fun that we've had on the show, but here's the thing, folks. Sometimes in life, we go through ups and downs. We have our times where we're going through growth, and growth is not easy. Growth is painful. I mean, you have growing pains, growing spurts, and they hurt. And Bruiser's going through one of those growth spurts, pains in life. It's just one of those times in life where it hurts. And I told him, I'm not going to tell you everything I told him, but I told him this. And it's simply this, is that we here at Darkness Radio, you included, are his family. And family doesn't give up on family. And he always has a spot here. From now until the end of time, he's family. And his spot will always be here. It's not going anywhere. And he's in no hurry to get back, and I'm in no hurry to rush him. So his spot's always warm. There's always the name on the back of the chair for him. And when he's ready to jump back in it, it'll be here. As far as I'm concerned, I have 3 co-hosts on this show. And Uncle Bob jumps in from time to time, so you could say there's 4. But there's 3 co-hosts, and they're all incredibly talented. They all bring something to the table, and they all knock it out of the park. And I'm incredibly blessed to have each and every one of them. And the fact that, like trained paid assassins, I can pick one out of the 3 and surprise and dazzle you guys with any one of the 3 is an amazing blessing for me. So I'm blessed. I'm happy. I'm tickled that I can do that. And I don't bring anybody on this show that will just fill space, that will just be an extra voice for me to just have somebody go, in the background. I would never do that. whoever I bring on the show has something pertinent to say, has a good sense of humor, and I feel you'll fall in love with. We'll put it that way. Because if I bring them on this show, you know that I love them, and I know that you're going to love them. And they'll fulfill what I think is the spirit of the show. And that's what matters. Enough of the preachy stuff. So there you go. That's kind of the housekeeping that we have for this week. Lots of good stuff coming up in the future. Lots of great plans on the table. I know next week, boy, do we have good shows for next week. Who are you going to be impressed? We're going to reach back into the bag. If you remember the Women of the Paranormal book, we had talked about a holy woman who she channels messages and she draws them out. She draws out the messages from spirit. We have her on the program next week. I'm fascinated by how this works. If you remember right, when we were talking to the ladies on the show, they were saying that our guests of next week drew 14 portraits from spirit in 1 hour, which should be physically impossible. But our guest next week is going to sit down and tell us how that was achieved. It's going to tell us how she receives these messages from spirit. And it's going to tell us exactly how she knows these messages are meant for exactly one person sitting in a full congregation. She still does this work, folks. So this person will be with us next week. I got to tell you who it is. I have my secrets. We also have an amazing True Crime Tuesday guest as well next week. So lots of good stuff coming up next week. I know I'm being coy. I've had to be lately for different reasons, but got a great lineup next week. And in the future, we're lining up some great guests for the future as well. So lots of good stuff coming up. I'm so excited, guys. I'm so excited about what's coming up for the show. I'm so excited that you guys are here with us. Again, if you love the show, rate and review us. Give us a 5-star review. Be nice, be kind. And tell a friend. Tell a family member. Tell somebody out there that you love the show. We'd appreciate it. Also, go out there. Be kind to a neighbor. Be kind to a friend. Be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. We'd appreciate it. We're going to go do the same this weekend. We're going to go have some fun as well. Furiosa is out there. I haven't seen it yet, but I hear that it's pretty good. People are telling me it's pretty good. I'm a little behind in my movie watching. Speaking of movie watching, I'm not one for, Nepo babies and stuff like that, but of all things, my youngest nephew tells me he wants to review a movie with me. So yeah, you may have a little movie reviewer. And he's not really little. I mean, he's a teen. So we may have a teenage movie reviewer. I want to get a little bit younger on this show. So I'm setting it up. There you go. He's kind of a smart kid. He wants to be an airline pilot. He flies flight simulators. I figure he's got to be smarter than I am, right? So we'll get his opinion on a movie here sometime soon. We're trying to shake things up a little bit on this show. That's all. Got to reach out to a younger audience too, I guess. Who knows? Anywho, that'll do it for this weekend and this week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy life. Go out and have a good time. Don't be so serious about this life. It isn't that serious anyways. Go out and enjoy the sun, have some fun, and we will see you next week for the best in true crime and paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio.